Interrelated is my company. I'm a brand strategy consultant. I work primarily as an independent brand strategy consultant with clients ranging from small to large. But what we do is we actually put together teams of consultants and bring together the right teams for the right projects. So apologies if I'm in your way if you can't see the screen, but that's what we do at Interrelated. We have a set of values we'd have to have, really, wouldn't we? This is how we like to judge ourselves. We like to make sure everything we do is relevant, memorable, captivating, relational and savvy. I hope this talk is somewhere along those lines. Tune in before you shoot off. I heard of Digital Henley for the first one, sadly couldn't make it, thought it sounded like a great idea. When the second one came along, I said I'd love to have a chance to talk. When I kicked off Interrelated, I was actually invited to speak to an event at Twickenham Stadium, actually, called Your Digital Future, and it was what I chose to talk about was kind of as the digital world evolves. And this was a few years ago now, so it was obvious that many channels are going to come into play, and it's so important that you tune in. And so this is an image that I've kind of had behind my business for quite some time, which sort of basically says, you know, if you don't tune the radio station in, you've got this cacophony of noise. If you don't tune it in before you turn the volume up, then your audience aren't going to really understand what it is you want to tell them. And that's kind of behind kind of what we do as a brand strategist. It really is about understanding your value proposition, really getting under the skin of what it's about and making that clear. And so I thought, well, okay, well, look, I'll just grab that title, and I threw that across. And then actually I've just put some slides together to try and make this. So this is totally new, and I haven't rehearsed it, and I'll probably blow my 10 minutes. But I want to kick off with this slide. You probably can't see it. Do you know who these people are? I have a first connection with Alexander. As of Thursday last week, a friend of mine introduced us on LinkedIn and said, I think this man needs your help. I don't know if you know the story. They were big in the news last week, and you can read up about them, and it's a very interesting story. Two lawyers having a tete-a-tete about, we have a feminist here. I think they called her a feminazi in some of the press. Yeah. Alexander basically commented on how stunning she looked in her photograph on LinkedIn. I'm not going to get into the business of whether he was right or whether he was wrong, or whether she's right to have taken the action that she did. That's not what this is about. There's 2 points I want to make here. One is that when I take my title, I could do the PR story, which is, you know, really think about it before you shoot off. But that's not actually the story I want to talk about tonight. What this does do, though, is he said something and she felt something. And that's really kind of part of the message that I want you to take away. This is about your brain. How does the brain work? He didn't mean her any offense, but she felt that he'd said something wrong. That's part of really kind of what I want to talk about. Another thing is really kind of predicated by the fact that the world is changing so fast. There was a senior director at Google who I believe said, today is the fastest we've ever gone and the slowest we will ever go. I'll just let you digest that. I thought it was a brilliant statement. I haven't quoted that. I couldn't find it on the internet, so I don't even know if it's a genuine quote, but I heard it delivered in a talk by somebody from Google, and I'm sure he said it was a senior director at Google. But I do know that this chap, Mr. Schmidt, said, if it moves, I've got to click it a bit harder. Back in 2010, actually, we create as much information in 2 days now as we did from the dawn of man through 2003. So I found myself a nice little graphic to try and give us some sense of reality for that. But that's an incredible statement. And then when you read into it, you find some very interesting arguments that people make that actually is not really very interesting information that we're creating today. It's just a lot of people regurgitating stuff on social media. And that was actually another thing behind kind of what I was thinking I'd like to talk about tonight. Are any of you on Periscope? Yeah, you familiar with Periscope? Periscope is streaming. It's actually from the guys at Twitter. and explore the world through someone else's eyes. That's basically what you can do. I spent several hours one night fascinated going around the world, looking at people in their different situations in different parts of the world and hearing them talk about their lives. It's very, very interesting, but there's a lot of people on there producing a lot of dire crap. We're all broadcasters now, but we're not necessarily able to broadcast. I was desperately keen to try and do it. I've done 5 broadcasts, 3 of them were at a rugby match. The trick is knowing how to interact with the people who come online and talk to you. Do you know a guy called Mark Shaw? But yeah, you would know him. Mark Shaw's fascinating. He's growing, probably one of the fastest growing communities on Periscope. Mark Shaw has developed a community called hashtag Tag Tribes. Anybody in that community, if you put that into your Periscope, then you're bound to attract a lot of people, because this community is growing. That's about 2,000 already, and that's growing, considered to be growing very, very fast. It's a shame you can't really see the picture. One of the other things about if you're going to be a broadcaster or something like this is he's developed his own language, a very, very fascinating language. He keeps saying boom when he's online. He's boom this and boom that, which kind of grabs your attention. And he talks about in the house, and he's talking to these. This is what happens if you're on Periscope: is you comment and talk to the person who's speaking to you, and he picks up on all of their names. And you can't really see the language, but they're kind of picking up on it. You know, Phoenix is in the house. Phoenix is her name, and he'll interact with them, which is great. And I think he's got a lot to teach you about how to use Periscope. Here he's making comments on Periscope going landscape, which is why he's doing that. But he becomes very visual, and I found that all very, very interesting. There was, from the same conversation, I grabbed a few things from this slide here. Somebody put the comment in terms of kind of, do we get excited when over new gizmos? Yes, because everybody gets kind of excited about the nice new shiny toy. HoloLens is going to change our world. Somebody else was commenting, and I think I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm not going to talk about HoloLens. Here is somebody using HoloLens to talk to a client about his piece of architecture and take him through using kind of virtual reality and holograms to actually see how this building is going to look, and you can get right in around it. It's fascinating where technology is taking us, and for marketeers it's possible for us to get rather seduced by this technology. We all want to jump on Periscope, or we all want to play with the latest toys, and probably forget kind of necessarily the toy itself becomes the message rather than what we're really trying to say. Technology develops new and ever more exciting ways to share our message. Isn't that fantastic? As marketeers, yes. So technology in the human brain. Do you think people really keep up? A few years ago, we all got quite excited about the QR codes. It's provided a graphic device on just about everything these days. I think a lot of people don't even know what it is. It does work really well. And actually, it saved my bacon. I got some new software technology from Vodafone, and I couldn't for the life of me get it to sync. But as soon as I scanned it with my phone, everything worked. So it can be incredible. But I think there's lots of people out there that haven't kept pace. They don't really know what this stuff can do. And as marketeers, we're very keen and excited to use all this technology, forgetting sometimes that maybe our audience hasn't kept up with us. But there's a bigger story than that. Proliferation of channels, and we've all had to start talking about multi-channel marketing. But then what you end up with is teams within client organizations that focus on different areas, and they become siloed. The data's siloed, the team's siloed, and the message is siloed. And so you start getting this cacophony of noise that I talked about earlier. Jeff DeMarais, who was Chief Communications Officer of Healthcare, I think he's moved now, GE Healthcare, talking about today's stories have no editors because of all these channels. He was coming from a reputation point of view. The best way to defend your brand reputation is to be a content creator, not a content chaser. He said that last year at Social Media World. absolutely everybody picked up on that. Really, really good point. That was last year. But the top-down, centrally controlled approach has had its day. Explosion of devices that we've all been talking about. Multi-channel marketing, this thing I referred to a couple of slides back, is really kind of being replaced by omnichannel. I don't know if you know the difference between multi-channel and omnichannel, but clearly it's about kind of, it's not good enough to communicate in one channel with the customer. There might be a better channel, and it's kind of how do we kind of move them onto the other channel and keep the conversation so that there isn't really a break. That's really kind of where businesses are trying to move to. But there's also a recognition in the industry that that's becoming table stake already. I mean, we're moving so fast. Somebody once said to me that when we get to the point with broadband, it should be like like electricity. It should be like turning the electricity on. And I think we're almost there. You know, maybe not there as much as we'd like to be, and it depends where you live. But to some extent, it's always on, and that's exciting in some ways, but we have to live with that as well, and that puts a lot more demands on us. We're in a very interconnected world, and the customer's expectations are ever increasing, and this is definite, you know, communities are the new powers, social media environments. That's where people share their grief and their annoyance, and also just generally disruption. Everybody's excited about disruption. It means we have to find new business models and so on. What it requires is us to tune in. That's really kind of a key message I wanted to get across. And I think it really, to do that, it comes back to sort of getting back to basics in terms of what the brand is about. The internal knowledge of who you are and what you stand for, those principles are so fundamental, because once you know that, you can express yourself with more confidence on all these new consumer platforms. So what we do at Interrelated is we say that a brand is a promise. We've been saying that for some time. I know a lot of people are talking about it in that way now, and that's great. And we say that a strong performing brand is one that's delivering that promise through the experience. What we're also finding is that, I don't know if I'm moving that forward. Oh yeah, there we go. People used to talk about the customer relationship as being the experience. People talked about customer centricity. I used to think, well, it's the brand experience, and it's the customer who's having that brand experience, so you want to manage that brand experience. But I understand much more now. We're really talking about, well, no, understand it from the customers, in terms of the customer relationship you're looking to have. And with that thought in mind, I take you back to that earlier slide with Alex and Charlotte. It was really about her experience that he needed to understand, not the message he was trying to put across. It was actually understanding what was going to be her takeout. It's that relationship that we're looking to build. That's how we build strong brands. We talk about strength through image, culture, and technology. And just building on that thought, image, very much the world of emotion. Tim, you've really been touching on that tonight. And as we move through culture, it's really all about engagement. It's about how you get people to understand how to engage. Technology gives us the ability to gather all the insights in order to inform that. And the exciting thing is that you can then use those insights and obviously build teams, people. This is where the human side of it comes in again. Barclays has got their digital eagles. Argos has got their digital army. I think even Mind has got their digital ambassadors. They train people up to understand what digital means for them as a business and what it should mean for their customers. So they're actually on the front line and able to deliver that. They are what you might call empowered. So we actually move from the insights giving us understanding to a sense of people being empowered. You can actually democratize that technology so they've got the insights, the information they need at the coalface. And I think as we move through this journey, we're moving to a point really where it's kind of all about authenticity. Yes, we can sell them an emotion. Yes, we can get all excited about technology giving us a new hologram that kind of takes us to another world. But actually, how authentic are we being? And I went online because the Internet of Things is coming along where everyone's talking about it now. The Internet of Things is going to have a massive impact on marketing, particularly when we talk about how we move people between channels. And I'm on a thing called Slack. A week or two ago, there was this group that I'm a part of on Slack. We were about 20 or 30 consultants. This week we're 150. It's a really exciting place. It's just for team working. But anyway, there's a group in there called Internet of Things, and I just went in there and I said, look, let's not talk about fridges and smart cities for a moment. Let's talk about what's the impact on marketing. And it's very interesting, some of the replies I got. Matt was sort of talking about, it made a bit of a joke about the idea that nobody's really kind of caught up and that Omnichannel is still miles off for many people. But as we got into it, so we got this, I wanted to push them a little bit and get them thinking about the idea that maybe as you're walking along the street, posters will actually use face recognition to see who you are and actually kind of push a message to you that's relevant to you based on your personal characteristics. It got quite a reaction. It's kind of scary. But I thought Craig gave me an interesting response here. We want a hyper-personalised world, but we need to explicitly give consent for that. And what everybody's forgotten is that we kind of have given consent. Our privacy doesn't matter anymore because you go on Facebook and you sort of tap, I agree to all of their conditions. Nobody really ever looks at that. Stuart Langridge is a blogger, a technology blogger. I'm sure lots of people in the room may know him, but he wrote a blog a few months back, and in there was this sentence, which I thought I'd pull out for us. The company who work out how to convince people that privacy is important will define the next 5 years of technology. That's a thought I want to leave with you, and I'll just capture it with this in this way. Moving forward, if brands are to have an authentic customer relationship, they will need to be so tuned in that they can respect privacy. Thank you.
Any questions? I was going to ask one actually. When you've got the multi-channel to omni-channel,
Yeah.
lots of big businesses obviously are still working in those silos, and that will have an effect on the timescale it takes to change to a more cohesive plan around these things. What's your take on that? What's your experience in terms of businesses that you've dealt with on the larger scale, and how can you immobilise them to make this change happen quicker?
So I think bigger companies that have got the budgets and that are being very strategic about the way in which they digitize their worlds I think, that's why I kind of did that little journey of steps. They were only single words, but I felt that kind of captured what I think those businesses are doing. They're understanding. A few years back, I got really involved in sensory branding. We were looking at how do you make things smell, what do they sound like. That was kind of what everyone was focused on. That was the emotion, if you like. A few years later, we started talking a lot about culture change and people and how do you get people to live the brand and engage in that side of things. That was the engagement side. We were kind of moving through to that. And then suddenly everyone started talking about data, big data, small data, and we're kind of in the heart of that at the moment. It's been going on probably for 18 months, 2 years for mainstream in that respect. Actually, all these things have been happening alongside each other. I don't deny that, but that seems, in my experience, the history of the journey. And really it's about how do we really understand, people are grappling with how do we really understand all of this data that we're getting, and then how do we use that sensibly. And I think the businesses that are trying to do that through their people are the examples I gave, Barclays with their digital eagles, Argos with their digital army. And actually these people are being trained to understand how to engage with their customers at the coalface. And it's really about how do we make digital very much more at the heart of our business. So some of the bigger businesses where they're being really strategic, they are trying to look at it in this way, but nobody's really quite kind of cracked it yet. And the omni-channel thing is miles off for many, which is why I got the laugh in the forum. But it is stated that it's becoming the table stake.
It's just such a massive investment for businesses, isn't it?
It is.
It's like, you if life is a series of commas and not full stops, and you try and convince big businesses that, you know, omnichannel is table stakes, but you're going to have to invest fucking millions of quid to know your customer everywhere. Like, how do you do that? I mean, we're having the same conversations all the time about, oh, you've got all this data, now you need to pump it through every channel so that they're always recognised. Like, how do you do that? How are you convincing big brands that the investment is worth it?
So I put a little talk together for you guys tonight. I'm not in the business of, well, I'd like to say I'm in the business of convincing big brands to be thinking about these things. I certainly would sit down and help them write their strategies. But at the end of the day, it takes an enlightened CMO or, you know, to be sat on the board or certainly at a senior level in the organisation to sort of actually want to champion this. And that's really kind of where it's got to come from. It's got to come from within the business. So advisors like myself, like yourself, Peter, can go in and if you like, put a hand on the tiller and help them to steer in the right direction. But it's not our job to take them through that process.
You
As
were
you say,
the
it
first,
takes a huge budget.
the first millennial CEOs of really big organisations.
It's coming.
All shit's going to break loose, and it's going to be amazing.
It's coming, but that's why I was throwing out that point about privacy, because that's, you know, that's not radical. People are talking about that. But it's a difficult subject to address, and that's why I think the technologist blogger is spot on. It's about how do you convince people that their privacy is important, and he cites in that blog some really interesting companies that are beginning to do it. Black Phone, I think it is, and there's a brand called the Silent Secret or something. There are some interesting things going on out there, but it's not mainstream, won't be for a long time. But I think businesses that have learned, because we're going to get this, we talk about this like electricity, it being around us all the time, we're going to get to the point where actually the technology is superfluous. And actually remembering that we are human. You know, everything that's been happening has been about putting emphasis back on the human. You know, why have we got digital eagles? Why have we got the digital army? They're people who, the technology is giving them the ability to have a relationship with their customers, but it's the people that people want to have a relationship with. People have always said, people buy people. So technology is possibly encouraging us to become more human. So maybe way in the future, 10, 15 years, I have no idea how long it will take, privacy will be so important that actually technology will be lost. And we'll have got to that point where actually it starts to feel right. But it's going to take a huge investment and a change in people's minds.
I had a great quote from Eric Schmidt last year in America, and he said on stage that he was going to have the conversation about, he said, you're all going to have the conversation about privacy and data with your children before the birds and the bees talk.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I thought, that's it, isn't it? That's the one right there, where you're basically saying to kids at 5 years old, careful what you stick online, because that's going to like live forever.
Exactly.
They're not the birds and the bees.